Welcome to Life Stories, where heartfelt tales of love, redemption, and transformation come to life. In today's story, we journey through the vibrant streets of New York to meet Ethan and Emma, two souls from different worlds brought together by an unexpected challenge. What starts as a reckless bet soon unravels into a deeply moving tale of personal growth, forgiveness, and the power of true love. Stay with us as we explore their path of heartbreak and healing, proving that even the most broken bonds can be mended. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. In the bustling heart of New York City, four wealthy friends often found themselves gathered at an upscale lounge, sharing drinks and stories. Ethan, Jack, Ryan, and Kyle were inseparable. They thrived on their shared appetite for adventure, mischief, and outrageous dares. Among them, Kyle was the most daring, always coming up with the wildest challenges that kept their lives anything but ordinary. One warm evening, the group convened at their favorite spot, a chic bar with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lively bakery across the street. The air buzzed with energy as customers hurried in and out of the bakery, cradling fresh loaves of bread in their arms. Inside the bar, laughter rang out as Kyle recounted his latest escapade, while Ethan sipped his drink, a sly smile playing on his lips. "You know," Kyle began, leaning back in his chair, "the problem with all of you is that you're predictable. Same parties, same women, same dull routines. Ethan, when's the last time you actually took on a real challenge?" Ethan arched an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "And what exactly do you consider a real challenge, Kyle?" Kyle smirked, his gaze drifting across the street to the bakery. Behind the counter stood a woman unlike anyone they typically noticed. She was round and soft-featured, her kind smile framed by auburn hair tied back in a messy bun. She wore a simple apron, her movements deliberate and unhurried as she handed a loaf of bread to a customer. Kyle's eyes glinted mischievously. "Her," he said, nodding toward the woman. "Emma, the baker. I bet you can't win her over. Marry her for 6 months. And stick with it." The table erupted in laughter. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "Kyle, you've gone too far this time. Ethan wouldn't last a week with someone like her. She's not his type." "Exactly," Kyle said, his grin widening. "That's why it's a challenge. What do you say, Ethan? If you do it, I'll cover your entire wedding, honeymoon, and 2 years of travel expenses." Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity mingling with pride. He had a reputation to uphold, a man who never backed down. The thought of pursuing someone as grounded and unassuming as Emma was, admittedly, outside his comfort zone. But the glint of defiance in Kyle's eyes was enough to spark his resolve. "You're on," Ethan declared, his voice steady. "But don't expect me to fail." Jack and Ryan exchanged uneasy glances. "Ethan," Ryan interjected, "think about this. She's not some socialite looking for attention. She seems genuine. Don't mess with her." Ethan waved off the concern. "It's just a little fun," he replied. "No one's getting hurt." But as Ethan stood and adjusted his blazer, preparing to cross the street, a small knot of doubt settled in his stomach, a feeling he quickly pushed aside. Inside the bakery, the warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread enveloped Ethan as he entered. The shop was modest yet inviting, with shelves lined with loaves and pastries, each crafted with care. Emma glanced up as the door chimed. Her gaze briefly met Ethan's before she returned to wrapping a customer's order, her demeanor polite but distant. Ethan approached the counter, offering his most charming smile. "Good evening. I'll take a loaf of your finest bread, please." Emma handed him the loaf, her movements precise, her expression neutral. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Ethan attempted small talk, complimenting the bread and asking her name. Emma answered politely but briefly, her focus unwavering. unlike the women who usually fawned over his confidence and tailored suits. Emma seemed unimpressed. She was kind. Yes. But reserved. As if shielding herself from the world outside her bakery. That night, Ethan returned to the bar, holding the loaf of bread like a trophy. Got her number, he announced triumphantly, waving a slip of paper. His friends cheered. But Ethan felt a flicker of uncertainty. Emma's quiet strength had intrigued him in ways he hadn't expected. Over the following days, Ethan called Emma, inviting her to dinners at elegant restaurants and showering her with expensive gifts. Yet, Emma remained cautious, her walls firmly in place. She accepted his invitations with gratitude but seemed unaffected by the extravagance. Ethan soon realized that Emma valued sincerity over showmanship, substance over superficial charm. Her grounded nature was a stark contrast to the whirlwind lifestyle he was accustomed to. And for the first time, Ethan found himself drawn to someone not because of her allure but because of her authenticity. Kyle, of course, found Ethan's progress amusing. So, how's our baker doing? He teased during their next meeting. Has she fallen for your charms yet? Ethan brushed off the comment with a smirk. Though inwardly, he felt a growing discomfort. Emma wasn't like the women they typically talked about in jest. She was real, someone who had built a life of her own through hard work and quiet determination. And as the days passed, Ethan began to see her not as part of a challenge but as someone worth knowing. Someone worth admiring. Yet, the bet loomed in the back of his mind, a shadow over his burgeoning feelings. He knew he had stepped into this game with carelessness. But he was beginning to realize that Emma was not someone he could treat lightly. She was, in every way, a reflection of the sincerity and kindness he lacked in himself, and he wasn't ready to let her go. Ethan couldn't shake the memory of Emma's gentle but guarded smile as she handed him the loaf of bread. There was something about her that stirred a quiet curiosity within him. Something he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't dazzled by his wealth or charmed by his polished demeanor. Instead, she remained steady, seemingly uninterested in the noise of his flashy world. That challenge, coupled with her undeniable warmth, made him want to learn more. Over the next few days, Ethan found excuses to visit Emma's bakery. Each time, he noticed something new about her, the way her hands moved with practiced precision as she kneaded dough, the soft hum of a tune she sang when the shop was quiet, and the way her face lit up when a loyal customer greeted her. It was clear that this little bakery was her sanctuary, and Ethan found himself respecting the life she had created there. He tried to coax her out of her shell by inviting her to fancy dinners and lavishing her with extravagant gifts. At first, Emma accepted his invitations, her curiosity about him tempered by caution. She dressed modestly, never fully blending into the glamorous settings Ethan brought her to. At a high-end restaurant, surrounded by crystal glasses and gilded decor, she sipped her drink quietly, her eyes scanning the room with a nervous energy. "You don't have to impress me. You know," she said one evening, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not someone who's used to all this." She gestured vaguely at the opulence around them. Ethan smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "You deserve nice things." Emma looked at him thoughtfully, her gaze steady. "Nice things are fine, but they're not everything." Her words lingered with Ethan long after their meal. He had grown so accustomed to winning people over with wealth and charm that he hadn't considered what it meant to connect with someone on a deeper level. Emma wasn't interested in what he could give her, she wanted authenticity. Something Ethan wasn't sure he had ever truly offered anyone before. Despite her reservations, Emma began to soften slightly as they spent more time together. Ethan started to shift his approach, trading grand gestures for simpler moments. He invited her to a neighborhood park one afternoon, where they strolled beneath the shade of trees, talking about their childhoods and dreams. Emma shared stories of her late grandmother, who had taught her to bake and inspired her love for the craft. For the first time, Ethan saw Emma's guarded exterior give way to something softer, a glimpse of the passion that drove her. "You really love what you do," he said, watching her eyes light up as she described the early mornings and long hours at the bakery. "I do," she admitted. "It's not glamorous. But it's mine. I've worked hard for everything I have. And I don't take that for granted." Ethan admired her honesty and determination. He realized how different she was from the women he usually pursued, those who saw relationships as a means to status or comfort. Emma, on the other hand, valued hard work, integrity, and connection. For the first time, Ethan began to question the life he had built and the emptiness it often left him feeling. But not everything came easily. Emma's hesitance remained, especially when she noticed Ethan's attention wander during their outings. At a bustling cafe, she caught him glancing at a group of women passing by, their laughter loud and attention-grabbing. Though Ethan quickly refocused on Emma, her smile dimmed, a subtle sign of the doubt creeping into her heart. As their relationship grew more complex, Ethan found himself drawn further into the challenge. Though not for the reasons he initially believed, Emma had become more than just a bet. She was a mystery, a puzzle that challenged him to reconsider his own values. However, the specter of Kyle's bet still hung in the background, a constant reminder of the secret Ethan carried. He wasn't ready to tell Emma the truth, but the weight of it grew heavier with each passing day. At their next meeting with the group, Kyle's taunts returned in full force. "So, Ethan," Kyle began with a smirk, "how's the little baker? Think she'll be around long enough for the 6-month mark?" Jack and Ryan chuckled awkwardly, but Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's doing fine," he said curtly, trying to deflect. Kyle leaned forward, his grin widening. "Don't tell me you're getting attached. This is all for fun. Remember?" The words hit harder than Ethan expected. And for a moment, he felt the sharp sting of guilt. He had stepped into this bet thinking it was a harmless game. But now, with Emma's kind eyes and cautious smiles etched into his memory, he wasn't so sure. As the group laughed and clinked glasses, Ethan stayed quiet, lost in thought. Emma had begun to open a door to something Ethan hadn't known he was missing. Yet, with the secret of the bet looming over him, he wondered how long he could keep up the charade and whether he even wanted to. As weeks turned into months, Ethan found himself falling deeper into Emma's world. Her quiet resilience, her unshakable work ethic, and her ability to find joy in life's simplest moments captivated him. Each interaction brought a new layer to her story, and Ethan felt privileged to see the person behind the cautious exterior. But the shadow of Kyle's bet grew heavier with each passing day, gnawing at his conscience. One evening, Emma invited Ethan to her bakery after hours. The warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread filled the room as they sat together, sipping tea at a small wooden table in the back. Emma shared her dreams of expanding the bakery and starting a community program to teach kids how to bake, a way to give back to the neighborhood that had supported her. "I want to create something that lasts," she said, her eyes alight with passion. "Something people can feel a part of." Ethan listened intently, feeling both inspired and unworthy. Emma's dreams were rooted in a kind of sincerity he had rarely encountered, and he couldn't help but feel ashamed of how their relationship had started. He wanted to tell her the truth, but fear held him back. How could he confess without losing the one person who made him feel alive? Meanwhile, his friends remained oblivious to his growing conflict. During a gathering at Kyle's apartment, the group's usual banter took a familiar turn. "So," Kyle began, his voice dripping with mockery, "how's the project going? Ethan, I'm starting to think you might actually pull this off." Ethan's stomach churned. He avoided eye contact, hoping to deflect the conversation. But Kyle pressed on. "Come on. Don't tell me you've forgotten about the payoff, 2 years of luxury vacations. It'll all be worth it. Right?" Jack and Ryan chuckled nervously, sensing the tension. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. "Drop it, Kyle," he muttered, his voice low but firm. Kyle raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you're taking this seriously." Ethan's silence spoke volumes. And Kyle's grin faltered for the first time. "Wait a minute," he said, leaning forward. "Are you actually falling for her?" Before Ethan could respond, the door to the room opened, and all eyes turned to the entrance. There, standing frozen in the doorway, was Emma. She had arrived to surprise Ethan, unaware of the conversation she was walking into. Her face, which had been glowing with excitement moments earlier, now drained of color. "What's going on?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Panic coursed through Ethan. He stood, his mouth dry, as Kyle's smirk returned. "Oh, you didn't tell her?" Kyle said with a cruel laugh. "Ethan here was dared to marry you for 6 months. Just a little game. That's all." The room fell silent. Emma's wide eyes darted between Ethan and Kyle, searching for an explanation. "Is that true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped forward, desperation etched into every line of his face. "Emma, please, let me explain." She held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "So, it's true." Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. You did all of this because of a bet." "It started that way," Ethan admitted, his voice breaking. "But it's not like that anymore. I swear. Emma, I care about you. Emma shook her head, the betrayal cutting deeper with every word. "I trusted you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I let you into my life, and you turned it into a joke." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. Ethan followed her, calling her name, but she didn't stop. By the time he reached the street, she was gone, leaving him standing alone in the cold, empty night. Back inside, Kyle's laughter had faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Jack and Ryan exchanged uneasy glances, while Kyle looked at Ethan with a mixture of guilt and disbelief. "I didn't think it would go this far," Kyle mumbled, avoiding Ethan's glare. Ethan's voice was icy when he finally spoke. "You've ruined everything," he said, his fists clenched. "I never want to see any of you again." Without waiting for a response, Ethan stormed out. He wandered aimlessly through the streets of New York, his mind replaying the look on Emma's face. The trust he had built, the connection they had shared, was shattered. And it was all because of his pride, his arrogance, and his willingness to play with someone's heart. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly lost. He had spent his life chasing thrills and proving himself to others. But now he realized the cost of his actions. He had hurt the one person who had shown him what it meant to live with integrity and purpose. And he wasn't sure if he would ever have the chance to make it right. The days following Emma's departure blurred into a haze of regret and self-recrimination for Ethan. He replayed the moment over and over, the hurt in Emma's eyes haunting him. She had trusted him, let him into her carefully built world, and he had shattered it for a foolish bet. The weight of his actions bore down on him like never before, and for the first time in his life, he felt the full brunt of what it meant to truly care about someone and to fail them. Ethan avoided his friends entirely. Kyle's smugness, Jack's uneasy glances, and Ryan's half-hearted attempts at comfort were more than he could bear. Their world, once filled with luxury and laughter, now felt shallow and suffocating. Ethan found solace only in solitude, using the quiet moments to confront the person he had become. One evening, as he wandered through a quiet neighborhood, Ethan found himself standing outside Emma's bakery. The lights inside were on, and he could see her silhouette moving behind the counter. Customers came and went, chatting warmly with her as she handed them their bread. She smiled at them, though it lacked the brightness he had grown to adore. He wanted to go inside, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But he couldn't bring himself to disrupt her peace. She deserved better than that, better than him. Determined to make amends, Ethan threw himself into self-reflection. He realized that his life had been defined by appearances and superficial relationships. Everything he did was meant to impress, to prove something to others. But Emma had shown him a different way of living, one rooted in authenticity, kindness, and meaningful connections. He wanted to be the kind of person who deserved someone like her, not for the sake of winning her back, but because it was the right thing to do. Ethan began volunteering at a community shelter Emma had once mentioned. She had spoken about her desire to help others, and though she didn't know it, her words had planted a seed in him. At the shelter, he worked quietly, helping with meals, organizing donations, and listening to the stories of those who came through its doors. For the first time, he felt the satisfaction of contributing to something greater than himself. As the weeks passed, Ethan's perspective shifted. He learned to appreciate the small moments of connection with others, whether it was a child's laughter at the shelter or a simple thank you from someone he helped. The experience humbled him, forcing him to confront the selfishness that had driven his actions for so long. Despite his efforts to change, Emma remained distant. She had cut off all contact, and Ethan respected her boundaries. He reached out to her friends and family, not to ask for favors, but to apologize. Most of them responded coldly, their loyalty to Emma evident. But Ethan understood. He had earned their mistrust, and he knew he couldn't expect forgiveness overnight. Months went by, and though Ethan continued to grow, the ache of losing Emma never left him. Her absence was a constant reminder of what he had thrown away. But he clung to the hope that, even if she never forgave him, he could still honor her by living a life that reflected the values she had shown him. One day, while cleaning up after a particularly busy shift at the shelter, Ethan overheard a conversation among the staff. They were discussing a new bakery opening nearby, a second location for a local favorite. His heart skipped a beat as he realized they were talking about Emma. She had achieved her dream, expanding her business and thriving despite everything. Pride and pain swirled in his chest. He was happy for her, truly, but the knowledge that she had moved on without him was bittersweet. Still, Ethan found solace in knowing that she was doing well. Her success was a testament to her strength, and he admired her even more for it. As he left the shelter that evening, Ethan paused on the street corner, looking toward the glow of her bakery in the distance. Though they were no longer a part of each other's lives, he carried Emma with him in his thoughts, his actions, and the man he was becoming. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet sense of peace. He couldn't undo the past, but he could build a future that honored the lessons she had taught him. Months passed, and though Ethan had come to terms with the consequences of his actions, his feelings for Emma remained as strong as ever. He focused on his work at the shelter, finding fulfillment in helping others. It was a far cry from his previous life, but it brought him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. He often wondered about Emma, whether she was happy, whether she had forgiven him, but he kept his distance, respecting her need for space. One chilly autumn afternoon, fate intervened. Ethan was leaving the shelter, his hands full of donation boxes, when he saw her across the street. Emma was walking with a friend, her laugh carrying through the crisp air. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed from the cold, and for a moment, Ethan froze. Their eyes met briefly, and his heart skipped a beat. To his surprise, she gave him a polite nod before continuing on her way. The simple gesture filled Ethan with a fragile sense of hope. It wasn't much, but it was more than he had expected. Perhaps it was a sign that she no longer harbored resentment toward him. He knew better than to read too much into it. But the moment lingered with him, sparking a renewed determination to make things right if she would let him. A few weeks later, Ethan received an invitation to a charity event hosted by the shelter. He was surprised to learn that Emma would be there as a guest speaker, sharing her story about building her bakery and supporting the local community. The thought of seeing her again made his heart race. But he resolved to keep his distance, content to watch her from afar. The night of the event arrived, and Ethan found himself scanning the crowd for Emma. She stood near the stage, speaking animatedly with a small group of people. She was dressed simply but elegantly, her confidence shining through as she engaged with those around her. Ethan stayed in the background, listening as she spoke about the values that guided her hard work, kindness, and the importance of giving back. Her words resonated deeply with Ethan. He realized that she hadn't just inspired him to change, she had become a guiding force in his life, shaping the choices he made every day. Watching her now, he felt an overwhelming mix of admiration and gratitude. As the evening progressed, Ethan and Emma eventually crossed paths at the refreshment table. She turned to him, her expression neutral but not unkind. "Ethan," she said softly, acknowledging him for the first time since that fateful night. "Emma," he replied, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," she said, pausing thoughtfully. "I've heard about the work you've been doing at the shelter. It's inspiring." Ethan shrugged, a modest smile on his face. "I wanted to do something meaningful. Something you'd be proud of." Emma's lips curved into a small smile, and for the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of warmth in her eyes. "I am proud of you," she said quietly. "I can see that you've changed." Her words meant more to Ethan than he could express. He nodded, his chest swelling with gratitude. "Thank you. That means everything to me." They stood in silence for a moment, the tension between them easing. Then Emma spoke again, her tone careful but open. "Maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, as friends." Ethan's heart swelled at the suggestion, and he nodded eagerly. "I'd like that." As they walked out of the event together, Ethan felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in months. He knew he still had a long road ahead of him, but the prospect of reconnecting with Emma, even as friends, was more than he could have asked for. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that, perhaps, redemption was within reach and that the bond they had once shared might not be lost forever. Ethan and Emma began meeting for coffee on quiet Saturday mornings. Their conversations started cautiously, filled with polite exchanges and gentle questions. Ethan didn't push or try to make grand gestures. Instead, he listened, giving Emma the space to guide their interactions. Slowly, their meetings grew more comfortable, the walls between them beginning to lower, brick by careful brick. Emma had rebuilt her life with steady determination. Her bakery flourished, and her second location had become a cornerstone of the community. She shared stories of her work, the challenges she faced, and the small victories that kept her going. Ethan listened intently, marveling at her resilience. She had built a world defined by her values, and Ethan felt honored just to be a part of it, even in this small way. For Emma, reconnecting with Ethan wasn't without hesitation. She saw the changes in him, the humility, the kindness, and the quiet strength he had developed, but trust was not something she gave lightly anymore. Still, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his actions. The man sitting across from her now was far removed from the one who had walked into her bakery months ago, full of charm and hidden motives. One evening, Emma invited Ethan to a community dinner at her bakery to celebrate another milestone. The space was filled with friends, family, and loyal customers who had supported her journey. Ethan arrived early, offering to help set up. Together, they arranged tables, prepared food, and greeted guests. Watching Emma interact with the people who adored her, Ethan felt a profound sense of admiration. She wasn't just a talented baker, she was a pillar of her community, someone who brought people together with her warmth and generosity. As the night progressed, Ethan found himself captivated by Emma's joy. She was radiant, her laughter ringing out as she shared stories with her guests. He stayed on the sidelines, content to watch her in her element. Later, as they tidied up, he hesitated before speaking. "Emma," he said softly, "thank you for letting me be here tonight. It means a lot." Emma paused, looking at him thoughtfully. "I wanted you to see this part of my life," she said. This bakery isn't just my work, it's my dream. It's everything I've worked for. I'm so proud of you," Ethan said, sincerity filling his voice. "You've built something beautiful here." Emma smiled, her expression softening. "I see how much you've changed, Ethan. And I'm glad you're part of my life again, even if it's just as friends." Ethan nodded, accepting her words with quiet gratitude. "I'll always be here, however you need me to be." Their connection continued to deepen in the weeks that followed. Ethan remained patient, allowing their friendship to grow naturally. He avoided talking about the past unless Emma brought it up, respecting her boundaries while proving his commitment through consistent, thoughtful actions. He took joy in the little moments they shared, whether it was a casual stroll through the park or an impromptu coffee date after a long day. One evening, as they sat together on a bench overlooking the city, Emma turned to him with a serious expression. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," she began. Ethan's chest tightened, fearing the worst. "Of course," he said, bracing himself. Emma hesitated before continuing. "I never stopped caring about you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It's been hard to forgive. But I think I'm ready to try." Relief and joy washed over Ethan, and he struggled to find the right words. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I promise I'll spend every day proving myself worthy of it. I want us to have a future, one that's built on trust, not lies." Emma smiled, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Then let's take it one day at a time." From that moment, their relationship blossomed into something deeper and more profound. Ethan remained true to his promise, proving his love through small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand declarations. He distanced himself from his old friends, recognizing that their influence had brought out the worst in him. Instead, he focused on his relationship with Emma and the life they were slowly rebuilding together. Months later, Ethan surprised Emma with a simple, heartfelt proposal, asking her to renew their vows in a private ceremony. Unlike their first wedding, which had been extravagant and tainted by deception, this one was intimate, attended only by their closest friends and family. They exchanged heartfelt promises, vowing to honor and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. As they stepped into their renewed life together, Ethan and Emma found joy in the quiet moments, the laughter shared over morning coffee, the pride in watching their dreams unfold, and the love that had grown stronger through trials and forgiveness. They had learned that even the deepest wounds could heal, and together, they built a future defined by trust, empathy, and endless possibilities. As Ethan and Emma stood together in their cozy bakery, the aroma of freshly baked bread filling the air, they reflected on how far they had come. Their journey had been marked by pain, redemption, and love, but it had made them stronger. They learned that true happiness isn't found in wealth or status but in the quiet moments shared with someone who truly matters. Their love had endured and blossomed, proving that even the most fractured bonds can be mended with patience, sincerity, and care. With a baby on the way and their dreams aligned, they looked forward to a future filled with joy and new beginnings. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more heartfelt tales of love, growth, and redemption. Like, comment, and share to inspire those around you. See you in the next story.